Hello, fellow founders. Welcome to Startup Gospel, where there's always good news for your startup. This is part 2 of the episode linked above and in the description below. So I'm going to assume you've seen that episode already, and that's why I'm going to skip the formalities and jump straight into the content today. Let's continue, shall we? So to summarize how we got here, I'm going to try to answer the question that I get asked a lot of, should I start a startup? And my reaction to this question is that while there's a lot of information out there about the mechanics and skills of doing a startup, no one's talking about what it feels like to do the startup journey, which is arguably the more important thing in all of this. And the reason that's more important, in my opinion, is because whatever you start out thinking and believing, whether that's your idea, what kind of company you'll build, the customers you'll have, how much they'll pay you, the investors and partners you'll find along the way, all of that is very likely going to change, maybe even many times before it's all said and done, and maybe even dramatically at that. So what's left then when you can't really control for any of that? Well, how about this? Will you regret going on the journey? It's one that can take many years before you reach the level of success that we all hope for at the start. Over 10 years in my case, thanks in part to the grace of my co-founders, but possibly 15 or more for them when they're all said and done. And yes, a level of freedom lies on the other side of it if you're successful. But honestly, how long can you work on something you don't like just because you want to achieve financial freedom? Wait, hold on, I'm getting a call. It's from the finance industry. Take that later. Any case, I wanted to find a way to convey the feeling of the startup journey to someone who has never done it before. So that's why I came up with 3 metaphors to try to transmit as many intuitions as possible to a potential founder. And the first of these is surfing the big wave. So that's how we got here. In the previous episode, I talked about the concept of mindset adaptation as the more likely candidate for what can be accelerated, as opposed to the literal mechanics and skills of running a startup, which I believe will take about 3 years no matter what. The main idea in the previous video was that startups are ultimately a low-rep sport, which is to say more like surfing than golf, for example. The secondary idea was the visual of a surfer racing down a monster wave at Nazare, and that being the moral equivalent of when most people hear about a startup for the first time. As a result, too many founders think of startups as that image and not the reality of everything that leads up to it. In this video, I'm going to pick up where we left off and take you back to the early days of being a beginner surfer to see what other wisdom we can glean about low-rep sports in general and how it might help us on the startup journey. I'm going to try a different style for this video. It'll take a few tries to settle in on a formula that works and is easily repeatable for me. And what I know works because I have high TRM in it is giving slide presentations. So as sad as I am about this, I'm going to keep the whiteboarding and post-production jokes to a minimum from now on, since I got feedback on the last video that my power level is still too low to pull those off. All right, Jake, take us to Eden's Inlet. All right, Eden's Inlet. Check it out. Conditions for winning here are to know your market. Okay, so in this destination, we're going to gain some intuitions for what it means to know your market. There are 3 key ideas I'm going to go through. The first is the analogy of truly knowing a beach and knowing your market and industry. The second is explaining the phenomenon of overnight successes, which do occasionally happen. And lastly, we're going to put success at the seed and Series A stages into perspective. Okay, so let's go for a walk around the beach. Okay, so Eden's Inlet is actually my fictional stand-in for a real place in Nicaragua called Costa Dulce. It's near San Juan del Sur, close to the Costa Rica border. By the way, here's literally my 0-shot mid-journey prompt, and look at how it basically made Playa Escameca, where Costa Dulce is located. It's basically 1-to-1. It's quite the paradise, in fact, and I love the team there. I've really gotten invested in their lives in the last few years, and well, actually, you know, I take that back. This place is terrible. Don't look it up. It's especially bad in February. Okay, usually in the 2nd and 3rd week, and you want to stay away. Okay. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right. Knowing a beach really well is like knowing your industry really well. You don't get to know the beach break unless you walk the beach and see it in every season. And I'm talking when it's stormy, when it's calm, when it's high tide, when it's low tide, when everyone wants to be there, when no one wants to be there, which remember is February 2nd and 3rd week, yeah? And so for myself, I only see Costa Dulce in February of every year, the worst time to be there. And remember, it's awful. So don't book, try January, March. Okay, so it wouldn't be genuine for me to say that I know this beach break. Okay, and founders are the same at the start. You might know your industry the way that I know this beach in February, and as you put in the reps, you become like the locals who surf it all the time. You end up knowing it really well, and that's the sensation you want with a market. Okay, so don't be the equivalent of me at Costa Dulce. Okay, next up, let's talk about a brief aside on the dynamic between getting lucky and actually being good. So you can definitely get lucky as a startup founder and become an overnight success. In fact, due to spotlight bias, this is probably disproportionately represented in the collective consciousness. In fact, these stories are really like 1 in 1,000 or something, or maybe even rarer if you count all the new attempts at starting a business generally and not just venture-funded startups. So it's the moral equivalent of suddenly spawning in the perfect spot right as the wave breaks. And actually, I found this here, which is, I think, very apropos. It's like here, this is stock video, so I have no idea how these people got here. But boom, like, it's like you spawn right there, okay? And then, what happens is the wave goes. Meanwhile, you're like this guy over here or something. You're doing the equivalent of making your 8th investor pitch and nothing is happening. Meanwhile, the waves are just going underneath, and man, how are people spawning in the right position, right? Actually, there's actually a note there about position that we'll cover later, which I think actually is explanatory in this case. So this may not have been the best example because I do think that you can control that to some extent, but more on that in a little bit. Now, okay, so interesting corollary is during bubbly times, random large sets just roll in without rhyme or reason. And this is exactly when you'll start noticing first-time founders catching big waves that maybe from the outside you would say they don't deserve. Okay, so they didn't study the beach, they just got super lucky. But what happens is when the waves get big, metaphorically speaking, the market gets interesting, frothy, like we're in a bull market or something like that, a lot of people run in, whether they have the requisite surfing experience or not. And of course, the analogy surfing experience is like operating experience, right? There are a lot of idea guys and girls out there just pitching ideas all the time. You would never see them unless you were on the VC side. And so you don't see them in visually in a lineup like this. But I promise you, it's analogous to this video. So with this many people in a line chasing decent sized waves, it's actually inevitable that someone will catch one, quote, undeservedly. And so maybe even more analogous is sometimes the person who's given the most tailwinds through media endorsements and wonderkin treatment does the equivalent of dropping in on someone else, which is what this guy here does. And so if you're not familiar with that terminology, let me show you here what was supposed to happen. So in surfing, it's there's a rule that goes wherever the peak of the wave is, right? Whoever is closest to it, that'd be this guy, gets the right of way. This, of course, is the shoulder, and this guy is very far down the shoulder, okay? So in this analogy, it's like, you were first in this industry, you kind of like spotted the wave first, you positioned yourself perfectly, and then some random competitor comes in and gets picked up as the favorite. They get all this media attention, right? They drop in, and obviously you're both going this direction. He doesn't even look at you ever. You're noticing him for the first time, and he just goes on his merry way, and you're just like, dude, WTF, okay? Yeah, so like that happens all the time, but my experience in this is we've seen a few of these come and go over the years, and actually they do kind of end up kind of in this situation here. So that is how it tends to go. So yes, it's ultimately better to be lucky than to be good, which is one of my favorite sayings in the startup world, because so much of the time, someone who is simply lucky does better than someone who is good. But that said, as an operator in the space, you can't plan on being lucky. So you have to try to be good as a default strategy, even if it's not objectively the best thing that could happen to you, right? And yeah, sometimes it does kind of feel like that. So, all right, let's move on to the next section. All right, folks, you can tell it's nighttime now. Some 5 hours has passed. while my TRM might be high-ish making slide decks, it turns out that writing them to be scriptable and telepromptable and actually delivering them into a camera is not something I'm good at, so this is taking way too long. I am determined to get this video out, however. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Startups are like beginner lineups. All right, so back to this image. Early on, when we're talking like pre-seed or Series A or something like this, it basically looks like a crowded lineup where no one knows what they're doing. Okay, so to the extent that anyone catches a wave at all, they're definitionally getting pretty lucky. And I can't emphasize the effect of the spotlight bias enough, right? Which is the cognitive error that puts your own experiences into the spotlight as opposed to seeing what's going on in the broader system. When you are in the startup, you are the equivalent of just one of these people. Maybe you're this person or something. And you actually don't have visual access, like surfing, like I said, is a sport in the physical world. You don't have visual access to what's going on. I mean, you might have some friends that do this, but realistically, you don't have that many friends that do startups. Like, it's not a common thing to do, right? What's challenging is that you're this person and you're nobody else. So when this thing goes, you actually don't know what else is happening. Maybe you're seeing the end result, but let me point out something then related, which is the idea of survivorship bias, which is we only hear about the times it goes well. You only notice that. Okay, so when I play this is you, okay, and this goes. Okay, by this point, obviously you notice this person, this person. Do you still remember who else was in that lineup? Look again, carefully. There was this dude. You never even noticed him, okay? Startup life is like this. This is the beginner lineup, okay? You're focused on your thing. You're trying to catch the wave in your market. You're not really noticing anyone else. So I think these two effects in aggregate lead to new founders having very distorted views of what it's like at the early stage lineup. Okay, so the reasonable plan takes a different path. Okay, let success find you because you know the beach. Okay, and we're back to this beautiful sunset view of Playa Escameca. I encourage you to walk this beach every day. Okay, it's going to be a separate topic whether the waves here are going to be big enough or not to carry your company's ambitions, but certainly you should approach every beach that you know, the industry that you love, the industry that you're committing to. Whether you know the right product there or not, it should be a beach that you're walking every day. Learn every tide, learn every season, be there when stormy, be there when there are no waves, know what the beach is capable of. Then you will know exactly when the sets feel bigger or unusual. And we'll talk more about that in future episodes, but that's often the result of a macro change of some kind, right? Just like in this beach, how if there's a big storm off the coast, or there's like a tsunami or something, and like these are the things that kind of carry the waves in, and you will know on that day that the waves are different. And indeed, this is what happened to us. We walked this beach for 8 years, and probably some neighboring beaches too, but all in this area. And then when LLMs came of age, that was like, in this case, a technological innovation that finally became ready. That was like a giant earthquake somewhere far in the distance. And we noticed the swells picking up more than they usually do. And we knew something was different for the first time because we had tried many different business models and we knew that none of them produced waves like this. Okay, so when we saw that, we went all in. Okay, the waves had, the big waves still had not come. It was just the little ones. And this is a huge shout out to my co-founders and especially Zach, who really led the company well during this time to spot that this was different, okay? And one day, the waves, the sets started rolling in and they were like this. And we caught the big wave, okay? So think about it, the macro changes, we can categorize them. Perhaps a new law gets passed that creates an opportunity overnight in your industry. That's the regulatory angle. Or perhaps a new technology comes of age. That's oftentimes the biggest earthquakes. LLMs is one, mobile's another, internet's another, okay? Or perhaps a broader societal change hits its inflection point. It's like a behavior that, some percentage of people were doing, the early adopters, and then it kind of hits that S curve, and then now everyone does it. And like the late majority kind of starts adopting it. Sometimes opportunities become available during that point in time too. So those are often the reasons that a startup really takes off, but it tends to happen to people that know their beach really well. One thing I gotta add too is the flip side of this idea is that sometimes the waves never get that large, okay? And to use this real example about Playa Escameca, I actually don't know if that's true or not about Playa Escameca. Remember, I'm only there in February, okay? So don't be that founder who's only there in February. You have to know the beach year round, over the years. You have to kind of know what it's capable of, okay? So most startup founders, when they start, are at my level of awareness about this beach when they decide to build an entire company around it, okay? The issue there is it may never get as big as you need to surf the big wave. The big wave might not come and might not be ready for it. And we'll talk about that in future episodes and how to spot whether that's happening to you or not, okay? But we'll call it here, okay, because it's late. Y'all, I am getting owned by the learning curve of making YouTube videos for the first time. I made slides for 2 more stops on this journey, but only got through the first one. It looks like we'll need parts 3 and 4 and
maybe even 5 in the coming week.
If you found this episode helpful, please share it with your co-founders, fellow founders, or even a future founder or business owner that you know. May peace be with you, and when you finally find that success you've been looking for, remember to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. All right, catch you in the next one.